Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to discuss some signs that you're emotional even though you think you're not. Well, here's another one of those situations where a self-fulfilling prophecy rears its ugly though informative head. It's ugly because it's informative. It's too informative. It tells us too much about ourselves. We don't want to look at it. So we call it ugly, but it's really just informative. And that is when you want to avoid emotions. When you feel yourself becoming emotional, you want to avoid emotions because you don't want to appear, quote, emotional in our culture. And that term has become pejorative. And I will not blame anybody for being afraid of being emotional, because it is something that is good to fear, emotional as we understand it. If you feel emotions come up and you don't want to look stupid, you don't know how to handle this stuff anyways, it makes sense from your perspective. Just go to a Jocko Willink blog and just consume whatever he says, and this gives you 5 more minutes of willpower, right? It's just this constant battle. But I would say emotional is not pejorative. It's only because we have an unhealthy relationship with emotions. I mean, very similar with sex. We would only use sex we would only view sex in some negative light. If we had an unhealthy relationship with sex, is the same with emotions. And so you try to repress emotions, and then of course the more emotional you will be in a negative way. So again, self-fulfilling prophecy. The less emotional you are in a healthy way, the more emotional you're going to be in an unhealthy way. So one sign that you care about politics is... So one sign you're way too emotional, even though you don't think you are, is you care about politics. And I mean care about politics. I'm not talking in the, let's have a philosophical discussion about, snifter or brandy after dinner. I got my smoking jacket on, and we're discussing how Adam Smith influenced the American Revolution. I mean, that's all fun, and nobody likes to navel gaze more than I do. I'm talking more the Republicans versus the Democrats, modern politics, the tribalism, the team, the rivalry aspect of it. Like, if you think that the problem with America is because everybody on the other side of the political spectrum, that may be a sign that you're emotional. Really what that is it's splitting. We feel conflicted within ourselves. There are parts of ourselves that we don't know how to integrate in a healthy way. The stuff that we don't know how to manage, that creates a split within us. We are no longer an individual. We are dividuated. We are divided against ourselves. We don't know how to deal with that. That's really painful. So what we do is we just project that issue out in society and go, oh, it's not me, it's the other side. Right? And guys really like to play a big game how disciplined they are and how much they hustle until it comes time for an election, and then people get really serious. So just another indication that, when we care about politics too much, that's a sure sign that we don't really care about ourselves. Another sign you may be emotional is if you use a lot of focus devices and apps and site blockers. I had a listener send me this link to this device. It looks like the modern version of a word processor. It's called Remarkable, which is a great name. Remarkable is the working title for my autobiography. And it's got, that ink screen that the Kindle has, so it's pretty cool. And it doesn't connect to the internet, but it has a stylus that you can... I mean, it looks helpful. I mean, it looks like it'd be cool to carry around with you. But the thing is... And I'm not saying not to use these things, but a lot of us, we think that we need these things, otherwise we're going to get distracted. We're going to get lost on YouTube or Twitter. But distraction, that's an identity issue. The reason why you're distracted is because you don't have a solid identity. Either you don't know what you care about, or you don't know what you care about, or you just don't care enough about it. And that's why you get distracted. That's why Twitter feels alluring. It's only alluring because you don't care enough about yourself. And the reason why you don't care enough about yourself is why you don't have an identity I mean, go check it out. My book, Man's Guide to Psychology. It's all because of dysregulated emotions. In fact, those are two ways of saying the same thing. Lack of identity, poorly regulated emotions, no self-awareness, right? It's like the Trinity. It's the different expression of the same thing, and it doesn't really make sense because you're ultimately trying to describe this ineffable concept. Ineffable. That was my nickname in high school, uneffable, right? Okay. So yeah, deny your emotions all you want, but this is going to affect you down the line, and it's really going to affect you in a way that you may really care about, and that you'll really never be able to fully develop an authentic sense of self. Another sign you're emotional even though you think you're not is you're overweight. Drastically so, perhaps. And I love the theories you go on Twitter. This is my own distraction. I love the theories you go on Twitter. Like, why are we so overweight? We look at these pictures from the 70s, 80s, even 90s, and people were a lot thinner. It was rare to find somebody who was, morbidly obese. And I think if this trend continues, I think, by 2030, we're just all gonna, every American's gonna turn so fat, we die, is what people say, I'm pretty sure. Well, that's definitely the emotion they try to convey. But, the theories are interesting, but, what we can really explain, it's like your favorite conspiracy theory. Yeah, maybe there's this cabal of people who are trying to gain power, or maybe, but perhaps a simpler explanation, and one you may not want to look at, is when people are afraid. And sociopaths in society who are more likely to use people's fear against them will do that to create power. Or maybe it's just like that. It's interesting. Your story structure for this cabal and how it formed, it sounds a lot like somebody becoming more and more anxious. Sounds surprisingly similar. I wonder why. All right, so we have these theories of why people are getting fat, but honestly, I mean, if we just look at the attachment issue and how much pain that causes and how we distract ourselves from pain. I mean, yeah, Twitter's a great distraction. Pornhub's a great distraction. Food's a great distraction too, especially easily consumable food. Processed food. I mean, it's starting to sound like dieting advice from 2004, but if you just combine, I'm in a lot of pain when I'm alone, and eating helps me to distract myself from that pain. It gives me that dopamine spike, whether in the form of you eat something even supposedly healthy, like some protein. So a great example. So if I just have a protein shake, right, I get full, but I could have about 1,500 protein bars and I never get full. Because the way they design those things. So you combine that and how that affects your brain, and even getting full, like that pain that comes from being really full. I mean, that's dopamine. So you combine that with the fact that you have emotions that you don't express around other people in a healthy way because you're not comfortable with your emotions, because you have emotional issues, you just don't understand it, you just don't get that. So you combine those two things and it can get really bad really fast. As easy it is to eat 15 protein bars as opposed to having maybe 2 protein shakes. It just gets that. It's scary. It's scary. I was talking about how one of my weak points is mango, dried mango. And somebody commented that's a humble brag. I'm still not sure that's a humble brag. But I'm saying, I could eat, if it was regular mango that had water in it, how many regular mangoes could you really eat? Maybe 3. But if you take the water out, I could eat it forever. In fact, it's like the Red Queen. The more I eat, the hungrier I get, right? So why do we eat a lot, ultimately? It may have something to do with the food, and I'm not saying, that has something to do with it, but ultimately we're in pain, and we're in pain because we have an emotional issue that we don't know how to handle. Another sign that you're emotional is you go to church. And look, it's okay to go to church. I get it. I go to my own church, which is group therapy. which is like more of like a free form, free spirit kind of church. But it's a church nonetheless. You don't think we're dealing with archetypes. We don't think we try to explicate these archetypes in our own way. That's what somebody does when they talk in group therapy, is they create their own church. And we relate with that church, because ultimately there's only one church, one true church, and that is the individual church, the church of the individual. So look, nothing wrong with going to church. But don't go to church and then tell me how you not emotional or how emotions are bad. Right? Like something Ross Perot would say, like, don't pee on my shoe and tell me it's rain, right? So yeah, just be honest about what you're doing, right? Just be honest about why you're going to church. Church expresses certain aspects of ourselves that are difficult to reconcile. Certain aspects of ourselves that are highly emotional, we don't know how to reconcile. And it gives us this form, it's this iteration of, it's like an iteration of everybody's dream. It's this collective dream out there. And we look at it, we're looking at ourselves. That's what churches do. It satisfies, that's a very strong, like, emotional sense of belonging there. So yeah, if you're going to church, I guess that's all I had to say. You're emotional. It's just like a more confined, and if that's what you like, it's like group therapy is Olympic lifts, and church, depending on how dogmatic the church is, it's like a machine, which is fine, and you get a good workout, whatever. And look, I use machines for stuff. It's a lot of fun, but sometimes, like, there's those really dumb machines that don't really do anything. Like, I was at the gym and I was using a tricep machine, but there's no back on it, and the circular motion of the arm was just awful. Maybe my arms are just have really bad proportions, but sometimes you get machines like that and it starts to become unhealthy, and then you get all this muscle imbalance and the connective tissue doesn't grow with the muscles really the way it needs to be. Or you could just do Olympic lifts. Yeah, look, either way, just admit that if you go to church, you have emotions you don't really know how to manage. Another sign you're emotional, this one may be more obvious, but you take sports talk seriously. And I guess there's a double meaning here. Both when you're talking about sports with your buddies, you take that seriously, or you go to the bar to watch a game and you really get upset at the guy who's wearing the jersey of the other team. There's that kind of taking it seriously. And then sports talk radio, which I listen to. But if you really take it seriously, and if some guy has an opinion, I mean, you got to hear you guys when you write in or call into these sports talk shows, and you get upset. I have to imagine that a lot of guys like that turn around and then look down on emotions and say that they don't get emotional. No, you are getting emotional. I mean, this is what sports is. It's this team. I mean, very much like the negative connotation of politics has this team aspect. And if we have any splitting or dark side, whatever, unconscious issues we don't know how to manage, we're way more likely to get emotional about that. So just admit, and look, I like talking about sports. I enjoy watching sports. But just admit that when you talk about sports, you're not really talking about sports. Another sign that you may be emotional, even though you think you're not, is you have some kind of gender bias. And no, I'm not asking, and I'm not talking about the kind of gender bias where, somebody asks you, well, who's better, men or women? And I think most people, unless you're on the crazy ends, the extreme ends of the spectrum, you're not going to say, oh, well, men are better than women or women are better than men. I think we have a gender bias where it comes up in culture today is if you think one gender, I think there are only two genders. Is that, that's the, we can't get anywhere without that. So if you think that one gender has it easier than another, that shows your bias, because guess what? Nobody can determine which gender has it worse, which gender has it better. You're comparing apples and oranges to begin with, and then there's way too many variables to consider. So I think, we've become more enlightened. in that we think, yeah, like men aren't better than women, women are better than men. We have different roles. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And that's okay, but I think the next iteration of that needs to be neither men nor women have it easier. We both had different challenges. We both suffered different kinds of oppression. And if you think you're going to create some graph to say that men have had it worse or women have had it worse, then I think that's another sign that you are emotional. And another sign that we're emotional, even though you think you're not, this is the penultimate one, is if you have a problem in a relationship, whether you're have a problem with a woman or a man, doesn't matter. But if you think that they're the crazy one, or the reason why you broke up is because of them, or the reason why you had such a terrible relationship is because of them, then yeah, you're emotional. Like if you think she's the crazy one, guess who else is the crazy one? Yeah, you're really good at diagnosing your ex-girlfriend as a narcissist, but if you spent that long with a narcissist and being with a narcissist was gratifying to you to that extent, then guess who else, right? I mean, you know what I'm going to say. I don't think it's too obvious. Guess who else is the narcissist? So that's another sign that you may be emotional. Yeah, every girlfriend, every boyfriend you have, guess what? It's not them. It's all a reflection of you. All right, final sign here that you may be emotional, even though you think you're not, is you're obsessed with goals and mindset. Again, I use that word, well, not again, but I just use that word obsessed colloquially and psychologically. It's an obsession in that you're running away from something, right? There's unconscious thoughts, emotions, whatever that come up, and you can't deal with that, so you have goals and mindset as a compensation. Now, not all the time. I think having goals is healthy, and I think having a certain mindset for a specific period of time, like if it's like do or die in this presentation, like we just got to go in there, it doesn't matter the fight you had with your girlfriend, you just got to push that away. You need to suppress that, not repress it. Suppression means, okay, I'm just going to put this on the back burner, I'll get to it later. Repression is, that doesn't matter as long as this presentation goes well. So, having goals is healthy, but I think if you do it to the extent that I think a lot of people say you need to, like if you have any negative thought, turn it off. Any negative thought is necessarily a negative thought. Well, guess what? That negative thought comes up because you don't feel good enough, because you don't know how to manage your inner life. You don't know how to manage the most important thing, the thing that affects everything else. Yeah, it's like what I always say about, we've been talking about working out. So let's talk about dieting. Like I think it's the same thing with I don't do a calorie restricted diet. I think that's insane. I understand maybe tracking calories for a little bit. I mean, just see how much you're eating. I mean, but not as a way of making yourself eat less or more. But the idea that you would count calories every day, I don't know. Just to me, it sounds really crazy. But I would understand, but I'm not saying that's wrong. Like I understand if you had to, get into shape for a competition, if you're a bodybuilder or something. I understand, right? For that 12 weeks or 16 weeks of preparation, you need to count calories and do this like calorie restriction, maybe weigh your food. I mean, that's another just, why? Dude, like it's crazy, right? I mean, don't even think about that because it makes your brain explode. Like, why are we counting? We have scales for food to weigh our food. And at the same time, we're huge. What's going on? That's, yeah, at any point in your life where it's doesn't increase your mating opportunities, but it still doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's a good sign that you are emotional. But look, man, I guess I would just say that, the most frustrating thing in the world. Well, let me just speak for myself. The most frustrating thing in my life has been trying to figure out these psychological issues and putting a lot of effort into doing so, but it doesn't matter because I'm not putting the effort in the right place. You know, it doesn't matter how hard you press on the brake pedal, the car's not going to go any faster. You got to look at the nature of the car and say, oh, this is connected to the brakes, this is connected to the engine, so I'm going to press the one that connects to the engine. If I want it to go faster, if I want it to slow down, I mean, I know this is stupid obvious, but this is how we need to look at our mind, is we need to not focus on the symptoms. A lot of what we do, a lot of self-help, a lot of therapy is focused on the symptoms. It's not about the symptoms. It's about the fundamental emotional cause that you do unconsciously, and because otherwise you would simply change it. This mismanagement of emotions, this dysregulation of emotions leads to these symptoms. Right? It leads to you being, stuck all day on the internet and looking at Jocko Willink videos, or motivation porn just to get 5 more minutes of work done. Or just to go to the gym that day, whatever happens to be. To me, that is incredibly frustrating. And look, maybe I'm just a big wuss, so it would, I can't stand doing stuff like that, but maybe you can. But if you feel like you've reached the end of the line, I encourage you to try that stuff, try self-help. Go see a modern therapist, go through the 12-week CBT protocol. Go for it. But if you find yourself crazier at the end of it, then we may be able to help. We do free consultations. AnimusEmpire.com/schedule. Thank you guys. And remember, the less emotional you are in a healthy way, the more emotional you will be in an unhealthy way.